Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special virtual edition of Personifest. I'm Coach Mark, and I'm extremely excited to invite you here to the Wild Apricot Tips, Tricks, and More session of this year's Personifest. This is going to be a fun one. This is the one where myself and the coaches kind of got together, put our brains together, and came up with a bunch of tips that we think are going to be super valuable for you, our users. And hopefully there is something here for everybody. Obviously, this was intended to be recorded. Or rather to be presented at the live Personifest, which would have given us a little bit more time to go through some issues that may be pertinent to your account in particular. And I'm hoping that we can still do that today. I do believe there is a question and answer portion of the Personifest, and I'm not sure on which side of the screen you may be able to get in touch with me, but I do believe it is somewhere here. So I'll be here throughout the entire session, although it is recorded, and I will be answering questions. And of course, the entire support staff and all of the coaches are also here to help as best as we can. So thanks so much for being here. This is largely going to be Wild Apricot tips. So if you are a Wild Apricot user, you'll definitely learn a lot here. If you're brand new to the system, that's okay. We'll do a little bit of an overview at the beginning too, and that way it gives us a chance to go through some of the more advanced tips as we go forward. So without further ado, I'm Coach Mark, and I've been with Wild Apricot since about 2015. You may have seen me in some of Wild Apricot's presentations or the boot camp. I've also been at the other Personifest, so we had one in Austin, Texas, as well as Savannah, Georgia last year. That was a lot of fun, and I guess we'll find out where the one next year will be pretty soon. But it's really been my pleasure to be able to provide my service to Wild Apricot users. Although I'm on this side of the computer and I'm largely helping people with the Wild Apricot software, I know at the end of the day that I'm helping you to manage your communities. So it gives me a lot of personal satisfaction. I hope I'm able to share some of that with you too. So for today's session, let's just move my face a little bit. We're going to cover a couple of key items. As I mentioned, first and foremost, I'd like to do a little bit of an overview of what Wild Apricot is, particularly the website management components of Wild Apricot. I think most people do realize that Wild Apricot is an excellent backend database. It'll manage your renewals, your memberships, registrations, donations, that sort of thing very, very well. But where I do notice, and myself and the other coaches from the perspective that we have, where we notice a lot of people do have a little bit more difficulty is with things like Wild Apricot website building. So we've included a lot of tips here. I would say most of them are relevant to website building, but there are a lot relevant to database management and just making your site easier to organize. So we're going to go through all of those. And like I say, in section one, we'll go through a little bit of an overview just for those of you who are brand new to the software, or maybe you're new admins or your new board members and you're just being brought up to speed. Then the meat and potatoes of today's session will largely be in the tips, hints, and tricks. And this one will be a little bit more informal. So we'll kind of, I hope to answer questions throughout this, but we'll kind of go through these tips, some best practices for them, and then hopefully you'll take the ones that will be interesting for you and you can go run with them for your community. We'll also talk about some of the other places to get help with Wild Apricot. The truth is there are a number of different ways to actually reach out and get some assistance here, not only from myself and the Wild Apricot team, but through our lovely community, our entire partner network, and all of the things that you find folks have made available for free out there on the internet for your fellow administrators and organization owners. So I'm going to go through some of those, let you know where they are, just so you can access them if you need to. And the goal here will hopefully be to give you enough resources that you can save yourself a little bit of time, not only doing things yourself, but maybe in training others to do them for the future. So those will be our main goals for today. And of course, at the end, if we do have time, we will have a Q&A session. I'm kind of notorious for running exactly on time, so we'll see what I can do to get everybody out of here a few minutes early. But without further ado, let's go into today's presentation. So first and foremost, a quick introduction to Wild Apricot and Wild Apricot website building. So as I mentioned, Wild Apricot is a membership management service. It's a membership management software and it's a membership management solution. And what that really means is if you're an organization that has registrations, dues, renewals, donations, I mentioned, also you need to make outbound correspondence with your members, then Wild Apricot is a great all-in-one platform that will allow you to do all of those things from the same place. And for most small to medium organizations, that really is something that makes life easier at the end of the day, not only because it means there's only one thing you have to pay for, but it means there's one thing you have to learn, one thing you have to teach others, and it really kind of, it can complete the circle so that you have something that you can actually hand off to a new board when the time comes. Now, of course, Wild Apricot not only has all of that automation on the back end, but it does have a fully functional website builder on the front end. And what typically happens here is whether or not communities are thinking about moving over to Wild Apricot right away, they tend to consider the option going forward. So let me take a step back. When people first approach something like Wild Apricot, they'll typically have a website and they'll need the membership management on the back end. So the standard approach when first migrating to Wild Apricot is to maintain your existing site, put on this additional database management on the back end, and then implement and integrate them via widgets. That tends to be step one. And what I find happens as the life cycle moves forward and people get more and more comfortable with Wild Apricot is they will eventually move their entire membership and their website over to Wild Apricot. And that's partially due to the reasons we mentioned, such as cost and being able to have everything in one place. But more importantly, it means that, or rather it happens because the initial goal for people, the initial project is largely to get that database management, the renewals set up. And once that is achieved and the recurring payments have started to come in and the organization is generally healthier, it gives people a little bit more runway to actually set up that other side of things. So that was a really long, rounded way of saying that traditionally it's okay if you are using Wild Apricot as just your database, but I do think you should consider using it for your website. And what's good is that most of you are using it for your website. Our stats show that most people do move over to Wild Apricot. They are using the Wild Apricot for their database management and their website management. And thus comes to the reason that I'm putting on this particular tips and tricks session, because that's the standard life cycle for a lot of people. I want to make it as easy as possible. Oh, and just a quick, the slides went up forever, but a quick summary is the website builder doesn't need any coding. So you can largely drag and drop everything. In fact, I think I have that on the next slide. Wild Apricot's CMS, and that's a content management system. It's kind of the technology term for how a website manager works. So if you're making updates to a website and you're adding content to it, then you'll need a way to manage that, the way to import that content. And Wild Apricot's system does exactly that. So with Wild Apricot's website system, you'll be able to make changes to your website very easy. In most cases, you can just click into where you want to change, start typing or changing text, and then hit save, and that should do it. But there are also a number of pre-built-in functions to Wild Apricot's CMS, pardon me, that will make your life a lot easier. Things like gadgets, things like the ability to play with layouts and create your own. Also the mobile friendliness of Wild Apricot's CMS. So all of that is actually really easy, and I know it doesn't sound easy when we're talking on a slide like this, but once you actually get into the website developer, you'll find in most cases you can drag gadgets into place, you can edit things one by one, you can change colors, backgrounds very easily, and of course I don't want you to be too afraid. I want you to feel like it's something you can do. And if you've been with Wild Apricot for a while, which I know many of you have, actually a lot of you have been here for 6, 7, 8 years. There are some that have been here for 10 years or more. You may not realize that Wild Apricot is actually now fully mobile responsive. Over the years, we've been updating our themes, we've been updating the code on Wild Apricot so that everything on the site now is actually possible displaying regardless of the size of the screen. That means it's going to fit on your, I don't have mine handy, but it's going to fit on your mobile device. It's going to fit on your widescreen monitor. And if you try and show it at a sports stadium on the Jumbotron or something like that, it'll do its best to actually fit on that gigantic screen as well. So what's really nice here is because it is the year 2020, this is a virtual conference, like it or not, the world is trending towards more technological place. More and more people are viewing websites from their phone. So to be able to have a system that not only can provide the experience to your members so that they can actually sign up and see your site on the phone, or regardless of what device they're on, but also make it so that your admins can actually set that up without really thinking about it. They don't have to do anything additional. It's all coded that way by default. It makes it something that's really viable going forward into the future. So if you are considering a redesign on Wild Apricot, know that it is mobile responsive, and that will make you very future friendly. Now the themes on Wild Apricot, many people have seen this, and I guess this is a bit of, I wouldn't call it insider knowledge, but I know it and you don't. So when some people, when you register for a Wild Apricot account, you are asked to provide a username, a password, I think your organization name, but more importantly, it asks you to select a template at the bottom of the page. This is when you're brand new to Wild Apricot and just opening an account. Now, those templates at the bottom of the page are very much just meant as samples. I think I actually get a very common question from people, which is, am I allowed to change this page? Can I get rid of the About Us page, for example? It breaks my heart a little bit because the answer is yes, you absolutely can. Everything on Wild Apricot is meant to be customized by you, but it's not always obvious to people. I think they sometimes think they have to fit into the existing templates that are created when you first start your site. So it's common, it happens to everybody. Don't worry, I definitely feel your pain, but please know that you can change that theme at any time. In fact, that can be done from the website and then the themes menu. And we have, I think, 25 variants of different themes. There are over a dozen individual theme sets with many different color codes for individual themes within that theme set. And you can change to them at any time. In fact, when you go to something like website and then themes and select a theme, you actually get to preview that theme before you commit to it. So it won't delete your changes. And on the screen you see on my slides now, if you did select one of these, you'll see at the top, apply selected theme. But the first step of that is to preview the theme. So when you click apply, it actually previews first. The next screen will ask if you do want to commit that change or if you want to go back to the previous version. So you can always get a good idea of what it may look like if you switch themes. And as you'll see as we go through the presentation, this is something I recommend first and foremost when you are considering a new website with Wild Apricot. And the reason for that is it really sets you up for success in the best way because you've selected your theme first and you don't have to make things match and fit outward. I'm not sure if that's the best way to put it, but once you've selected your theme, everything's naturally going to fit with itself. So you don't have to force things to fit with it. I guess that's a better way to put it. Now, before you commit to a theme, we did mention that you can indeed preview it. Something else that I want to make everybody aware of, especially those of you that are existing clients, we at Wild Apricot Support have the ability to completely clone your site at your behest, of course. So if you do request it, we can take your site, clone a majority of it, I think it's 3 events per site. It takes a certain amount of database people, but more importantly, it does take all of the website elements of your site. That way, you can take that duplicated or cloned site, play with the theme switching, see what it looks like, see what kind of work it may be if you do decide to change the theme. For example, what I recommend to people is see how quickly you can recover some of the changes that may happen if you select a new theme. And for example, those changes will happen because each theme has a different, we kind of talked about it, but each theme has a different sample template. And when you create a new theme, it creates all of those sample templates for you. It doesn't delete your old stuff, it just moves it out into not in the menu, into pages not in menu because they don't naturally fit that original theme. But in many cases, you can kind of take selected elements from those pages that got removed, fit them one by one into the theme. And because, I guess this is a good way to say it, because you've had that duplicated site, you've already tested this and seen what kind of procedure this may take. So once you've practiced once, you can kind of bring the entire process down to something that may only take 10 minutes. So that's one option there, and we definitely can do that for anybody who does have an account. If you do want an account clone, you will have to be a full administrator on the site, but you'll just have to email us at support@wildapricot.com. So if you're a new account and you want to clone somebody's existing site, let's say a friend of yours or one of your brother or sister organizations, you'll need their permission. So they'll need to get in touch with us and say, I give permission for our site to be cloned. But from there, we're happy to do it. Now, gadgets. I did mention gadgets a little bit earlier. Gadgets are pre-built into Wild Apricot, and they're most of the complex things that may be a little bit more complicated if you try to approach them yourself. So traditionally, gadgets are things like membership application forms, event calendars, donation forms, subscription forms, and anything like that that would use the data that you have in Wild Apricot to be able to display something visually for a website. And all of these are built in. These are exactly the sorts of things that I mentioned are drag and drop. So if you want to move your membership application onto your homepage, for example, you'll just head to that homepage in Wild Apricot, click edit, and then at the very top, you'll see a gadgets button that you can then click, find the membership application, drag it, and drop it and place it on the page. That makes it really easy to move stuff. It makes it really easy to create your own pages. Just to harp on something I said a little bit earlier, it means you don't have to use the pages that are created for you with Wild Apricot. You can completely make your own. And where this is fun, especially if you attended my multi-chapter session that I think is before this one in Virtual Personifest. But if you did attend that one, then you also know that you can do things like create completely different website spaces for people, and then use the gadgets to be able to recreate functionality in those spaces. And the example I'm thinking here is, let's say you have a bronze, a silver, and a gold aspect to your membership. Maybe on the bronze section of the web page, you want to have a specific event calendar that the gold people they may not be able to see. They'll see their gold calendar events. So using the gadgets and the settings that are involved within, you can do things like have event calendars that will only be pertinent to certain types of members, and things like registration forms that will only be pertinent to others. It makes it really easy, and of course they're all built right in, so please do experiment with them as much as possible. Simply by dragging them onto your page, they will start working right away, and as soon as you click them when they're on your page, you'll be able to see the page settings on the left-hand side of the screen, or sorry, the gadget settings on the left-hand side of the screen, and that'll give you a ton of options to play with those gadgets individually. Now, one or two more things, basic Wild Apricot information before we go forward. Site pages and page templates. Now, this is something that is perpetually confusing to a lot of people, and I want to do my best to sort of indicate what I think the best practice is here with the site pages and the page templates. So what I've done on this slide is indicate both what let me take a breath, site pages and page templates are. Site pages are basically each individual page on your site. In fact, I can use the example in my background. So site pages would basically be each individual picture in these frames. However, the page template is basically the frame itself and the, I guess, like the background of the site, the overall look and feel. This is where you would traditionally put things like your organization's logo or your login box or the menu bar. And if you refer back to the slide that I have on screen, this picture in the center of the page, the light green elements on the sides and the top and the footer, these would traditionally be what page templates are used for, because they'll be the same on every single page of your site. Whether somebody's clicking your application page or your contact page, or maybe just a photo gallery on your site, ideally, you want the menu bar to be in the same place. You'd want the header and the footer to be the same. That way people can navigate off of that page. They can find their way around. And on Wild Apricot, that's what page templates do best. So once you've created a page template with your logo, the login bar, all of that sort of thing that you would want to be standardized on every single page, then you can start creating site pages that use that page template. So every site page will look the same regardless of what you're using it for, and that way your members will be able to navigate around very easily, hopefully like me. Now, widgets are the options that are available to people who are still approaching Wild Apricot from an external site perspective. So if you're brand new, or if you haven't moved over to Wild Apricot yet, then widgets will allow you to take Wild Apricot database functionality and implement it down externally into some external site. So you can see a list of the options available. You have things like event details, member applications, donation forms, the blog, the forum, and subscription forms as well. And all of those can just be copied and then pasted onto your external site. Once you've set up the database elements on Wild Apricot, the code is already created for you. The same way that the gadget that would be internal to Wild Apricot is already created for you, the widget code is already created, and you can take it and use it externally. Now, of course, there are some downfalls here. If you're using widgets on another site, but you want people to be able to pay their registrations, they need a way to securely log in. For example, if you want them to edit their profile information, but you have an external site, then they still need that way to log in securely in order to edit their own details. So to that end, we have a single sign-on capability with Wild Apricot. There's also a WordPress plugin. But as I mentioned, a lot of people eventually do move everything over to Wild Apricot for simplicity, for cost, and so it's easier to pass it along to future board members. But suffice to say, all of this functionality of Wild Apricot that you can see on your screen definitely works in an external capacity. Okay, we're gonna head on into the tips, and even more tips. I couldn't really think of a good way to title this slide. And I'm gonna take a quick sip just to wet my whistle here so that I can talk even more. Okay, so what I have done, and if anybody was at Personifest last year, then you might have seen a variant of this presentation, but it's one that I actually really like. It's not to say that I don't like my other presentations, but this is the one I like the best because I get to go around and bother my coworkers and say, give me a tip that you would want every single person who uses Wild Apricot to know. And so what I've done is I've gone and I've asked all the coaches. You may have encountered some of us Wild Apricot coaches before as well. We're kind of like the teachers of Wild Apricot. Years and years and years ago, we knew that we had this great software, but it was largely technical documentation. People would learn it on their own. We had things like the Facebook group, and we also, of course, had technical support, but it was still largely dependent on people learning their own way through the software. Enter the Wild Apricot coaches, who have kind of tried to figure out better ways to teach and help people to use the software as much as we possibly can. So you may have seen us in things like webinars and at places like Personifest, at other events like ASAE, or some of the Personified Connections conferences. And if you have spoken to us, hello again. It's really nice to see you. But if you haven't, then I wanted to introduce from left to right. We have Coach Elaine, Coach Stephen, Coach Rano, Coach Nikki, Coach Gordon, Coach Tyler, and then all the way on the right with the Chrome Dome, that is me, Coach Mark. And that picture, I think, was at actually Personifest 2018 in Austin, so that was a lot of fun there. But the 7 of us have been in charge of creating easier ways to learn Wild Apricot for a long time now. So it's a real pleasure to have you here. This is a fantastic way to help, and hopefully some of our tips are really useful for you. So first and foremost, Coach Rano would like you to know that there is a way to edit the initial password email that people get when they sign up with Wild Apricot. Well, your members, sorry, I should be more specific. The email that your members would get when they sign up with Wild Apricot. In previous years, this was always a source of annoyance for people. Not only did people not always want that password email to go out, but they did want a way to turn it off altogether. So I am here, I guess, to tell you 2 things. The password email can actually, number 1, be customized. So you can change that so that it not only has this important password information that you see on your screen now, but you can use it to do things like, well, the example that I'm thinking, the main example is really as a welcome package for people. So a really common question I get is, can I give new users to my site a care package, a welcome package, details about their membership, et cetera, et cetera. And the way that I have commonly recently been recommending is edit this password email, because it does allow you to edit the entire contents of the email, so you can have the actual password information, but also things like be aware that our conference is in a couple of months. Don't forget to register. Here's a link, things like that. I hope that some ideas are swirling in your head right now. The other thing I wanted to point your attention to here is that you can actually turn this password email off altogether. And that is our solution to the feedback that we received, where it was constantly annoying for people. So if you don't want this email to go out, I suppose keep in mind that people may not be able to get their password, but if for some reason you have a different organization structure, maybe you have a you know, an initial intake of your new members and you do it in person, that's where they get all of their info, so they don't really need this password. Whatever it is, you can turn it off altogether, you can customize it altogether, and this option is actually in your main account. All you'll want to do is go to settings, and then it is password email in the emailing section. So that's in the database portion of Wild Apricot. You don't want to be in the website section. You'd like to be in the other section, the database section. That's the home icon in the top left. But once you're there, the settings menu will let you adjust this password email right away. So I'm hoping a couple of you, I mean, watch the end of the presentation. Don't go away right now, but I'm hoping a couple of you are looking for that right now. Actually, based on every time I have done this presentation, people tend to drop out right in the middle because they'll say, oh, I've been looking to do that for a long time, and then they'll just run off and do it. So that's okay, I guess that's fun. I would appreciate if you stay the whole day. Okay, template organization. Use as few templates as needed. So Coach Elaine thought this was the most important thing to mention to people when they're considering Wild Apricot for their website. And what happens is most of the time, people will be using too many templates. And admittedly, Wild Apricot is half at fault here because we do provide those templates to you as a sample with every single new site. However, our intention has always been to show you that it is possible to achieve these sorts of things. For example, if you wanted individual landing pages on your site that had different backgrounds, different templates, or if you wanted to make a members only section that was completely different than the public facing section of your website. But as with everything, these are meant as samples only, and it's really our fault because we tried to do our best to show you can do it, but we didn't want to shoehorn or force you to do it. So Coach Elaine reckons that there is a really good way to approach this, and that's if you don't need multiple templates, try and work with one exclusive template all the time. And that most cases, that is the standard template, which you'll see on the slide here has a little star next to it. In your Wild Apricot account, you can create a different standard template, or rather you can create a different default template. That's how the star gets attached there, by just picking one of your templates. But what you would want to probably do here is save yourself as much time as possible. So on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see that when you do select one of your page templates and you hover over that used on X pages link there, it'll show you which pages are using that template. Why this is important is because if you do want to go down to a system where you're using one or at least as few templates as needed, this can help you to change the fewest amount of things as possible. So for example, if you were to change everything over to a different template from the standard template, it would require you changing dozens of pages. Whereas on this example, you can see that there's only one page using this particular standard template copy. So what we could do is go to that members only content page, change the template for it, and then go ahead and delete this additional template that we don't need. That may save the most amount of time, and of course that's going to make it easier for you to be able to train others on how to make changes. So I do strongly consider it. I would urge you to strongly consider it. That being said, if you are already using multiple templates and it's working for you, you're not doing anything wrong. In fact, you're doing it very right. I just want to help other people feel as confident as you may feel. So that's Coach Elaine's tip. I hope it does help a little bit. We talked about this one a little bit earlier, but Coach Nikki said window shopping for examples can actually save you a bunch of time. With Wild Apricot, a lot of you may be sole proprietors, you may be the only people who are administrating your community, but a fair portion of you may be part of a larger network as well. You may have other chapters that are already using Wild Apricot. Somebody from your regular job may have told you about Wild Apricot and you've learned from them. The point being is that there is already this small network here of people who have existing Wild Apricot sites, have experience, have knowledge, and subsequently you can learn a lot from what they have done. So Wild Apricot does help here by putting out some articles pretty frequently about some of the better examples of websites on Wild Apricot. Also, these are people who have put their hand up and said, we're willing to be examples for you, so please use our information. But as I mentioned a little bit earlier, if you do happen to be in these networks and you're looking for a little bit of a starting point and you're able to get permission to clone their site, that can really help. So it's always possible to take a look at some of the examples out there. A lot of people don't realize actually that if you go to Google and you type something like powered by Wild Apricot and then any particular industry type, you'll probably find dozens of examples of sites that are using Wild Apricot right then and there. So if you are a social person and you're really good at connecting virtually, then go ahead and reach out to some of these communities, see if you can't get some advice from them and see if you can't get permission to clone their site. That way it'll help you to save a little bit of time and maybe standardize everything for your members as well, so they'll find their way around from one place to another. Now, Coach Tyler has some advice about making fast bulk updates. This is actually something that can save you tons and tons of time. So I'm going to talk slowly, and I may repeat myself a lot because I do think this one is a very good tip. So in exporting your contact list, you can actually maintain all of the existing information in the exact same structure that it is in Wild Apricot. So for example, if you do head to contacts and then list, and then you click the export button to export all of your information, it'll not only give you things like first name, last name, email for people, but it'll do all of the back end system stuff that you may not have even known was there. So to show you their newsletter subscription preferences, what groups they belong to, as well as things like their membership status, their renewal status, et cetera, et cetera. So ergo, when you are, well, actually this works in two ways. When you are when you want to make bulk changes, you can export the entire list, add a new column to that list. It's going to give you an entire spreadsheet with everything already created. All you have to do is create a new column, add the additional info there. So maybe it's kind of like, gave permission to use their picture in the annual catalog, whatever it is. You can add that additional information for all your people there, and then take that same list and import it right back into Wild Apricot. You don't even have to update most of the fields because the system already has all of that info you exported from it. Basically everything you exported, it already has. So it has people's email, it has their name, it has everything that you had. all you need to do is amend that list or the new info into that list. And to do that, the only thing you need to match up is either the user ID or the email. So as long as you're importing the email address plus that new column of info, it's going to match everybody up to their existing record. It's going to update that info. And if you practice it, that entire process will take you probably less than 5 minutes. So even if you have tens of thousands of users in your Wild Apricot account, you can make mass updates for them using this bulk update method. Now, this is listed on the gethelp.wildapricot.org help page, and of course, we're happy to help you through it at any time. But I'll just go back to the previous slide quickly because this is where the option is. It's in contacts, list, and then export. And then you can choose to export all of your fields or just some if you do need to make a report on maybe some information for like event registration or donations, what have you. Now, really quickly, the other reason that this is really useful is if you're brand new to Wild Apricot and you need a way to manage the information that you do have so that it can be imported into Wild Apricot, well, then by exporting the existing Wild Apricot list, you basically take everything that you've created on the back end in the database, plus all of the system fields that are there by default. And that gives you a really, really good template to start fitting your information into. The best practice here would actually be to create all of your database fields first, then export that list, fit your information into it, upload it, and that whole process will make sure that everything goes in completely accurately. So really, really useful. If you've been to bootcamp, this was in lesson 5 because it's one of the things that you don't need during setup, but for sure you'll use down the road. So if you are an administrator of a Wild Apricot account that's been around for a long time, definitely check out how to make bulk updates. Okay, easy mobile views. Coach Gordo, Gordon, I suppose, we around here, he's just Gordo. We've dropped that last letter, but wants you to know that there are actually some really easy ways for you to be able to preview your page as a mobile, in the same capacity that it would show up on a mobile device. There are ways on Wild Apricot to preview things like emails in a mobile capacity, but it doesn't always show you your entire web page, which can be a little bit frustrating if you're trying to see how it's going to look on a phone. But there are a couple of easy ways to do this. The first and foremost, and I really should have grabbed my cell phone because it's just out of reach on this other desk, but the first way would be to navigate to your site with your phone. Even if you're in a Wild Apricot trial account, or if you have a free account, or no matter what your situation is, you'll always be able to head to your Wild Apricot account address on your phone, and it will show you that mobile version. So traditionally, that'll be something like website.wildapricot.org. Whatever have you, and you'll be able to actually visit that on your phone. The other way, and the way that I use the most frequently because it's actually quite easy, is to actually just take your browser window, unmaximize it, or don't minimize it, but just unmaximize it, and then shrink the window down so that it is browser sized. And once you take that window and you actually drag the corners down so that it's the same size as your mobile device may be, you'll see things on Wild Apricot automatically adjust to the mobile view. You'll see the menu bar switch from a horizontal menu bar into the mobile-friendly version. You'll see pictures scale down. You'll see the layout organization move from a horizontal one to a vertical one. And that, of course, can make it really easy just to quickly see what it is you're actually doing with Wild Apricot. There's another way to do this. If you are familiar with the developer console, and I don't want to demonstrate that here because I think it'll just clutter up this presentation, but for example, on Chrome or Firefox, it's F12. On Safari, you go into Show Advanced and Show Developer Console. But that does give you this, what you see on screen here, and that lets you do a lot of fun CSS stuff. But more importantly, it has a little button, the one that the arrow is pointing to, that'll actually let you resize the screen to simulate a mobile device. So that can be really quick, especially if you have 2 monitors and you can have this developer console on the second monitor and just be able to click that button quickly to be able to see a preview on the first screen. Anyway, I just wanted to show you because it's a really quick way to be able to see that on a mobile device. I really think it's quite, it makes it quick when I'm designing stuff myself personally, and it can save you a bit of frustration from having to have multiple devices open or have one Wild Apricot website browser open, but then a second incognito browser open so that you can see things as a public member. It just saves a lot of that headache by being able to quickly sort of either resize the window or click that developer console button and see the mobile view. Now, of course, we are talking about mobile, so we're going to go on to the next tip here, which is by Coach Stephen. He does recommend planning for your site to be mobile friendly. We mentioned a little bit earlier that the year is 2020 and people are going to be doing more and more business with their phone. They're going to be connected more and more with their mobile device. So why not be future friendly? Why not plan for things to be able to work in perpetuity by creating things on Wild Apricot that are mobile friendly? So the way to do that, there are actually a lot of ways to do this on Wild Apricot. It's one of those things where you can everybody will have a different idea of what it is they actually want to present on their page. So the solution for everybody may be a little bit individualized. But by and large, the number one thing you can do to help create your site in a mobile friendly way is to stick to the auto sizing as much as possible with Wild Apricot. A really common pitfall is people will try and do something like fit their organization's logo onto the page, but that organization's logo may have been imported in a picture format that doesn't necessarily fit the page as is. So the common one here is, and I hope that everybody has experienced something like this in their life, but the common one here is people trying to fit widescreen pictures into a portrait-sized page, or the inverse, trying to fit a portrait-sized picture into a widescreen designed page. And so what they do is they will use Wild Apricot's ability to edit things to actually change the picture size internally. So that you may see down here where the arrow is pointing to the auto thing, people will instead start to use fixed sizes for their pictures. And that can make it look really nice. It can make it look fantastic. Using those sorts of margins and padding and the fixed sizes for pictures, you can make things look perfect. But here's the problem, it's only gonna look perfect on your screen because only your screen has that particular monitor resolution, only your screen has maybe the admin logo on the side, whatever it is only gonna look perfect on your screen if you start using those fixed image sizes. So the solution here would be to use the auto sizing as much as possible, and if possible, adjust that image before it comes into Wild Apricot. So rather than have to adjust it in Wild Apricot and force a widescreen image into a portrait size or what have you, if you can actually, or somebody can open up Photoshop or whatever your image editing tool is and edit that photo so that it's going to naturally fit in the format that your page is, then you can stick with the auto sizing, it will automatically fit, and then that way it will look, it will scale down properly on mobile devices. So I really think this is a great tip. And you know, I can't blame anybody for trying to fit things in the other method. It's not always obvious why pictures don't fit into Wild Apricot. And quite frankly, if I had made a really nice looking site, but then I had to change all of the picture sizes because they weren't going to fit the widescreen format, then I also would probably pull even more of my hair out. You know, it is a good tip going forward. So if you are at all considering redesigns, please consider this. Keep it in mind. It's going to save you a lot of frustration down the road. Okay, now Coach Rano recommends using Wild Apricot's versatility. So we've talked a lot about how Wild Apricot doesn't require any code or CSS or HTML, but what's nice about it is it does allow for it as well. So if you don't know how to do any website building and you just want something set up in an hour or two, then that's fine. Wild Apricot has templates, it has themes, you can take them, edit them, and roll with them. They're gonna work great for you. But if you do have slightly bigger projects in mind, or you have the ability to do these things, then Wild Apricot allows you to edit CSS, JavaScript, and HTML for your pages. And what that means is you can use a lot of external goodies like things like widgets from YouTube, or I'll go to the next slide, other things like online chat that can be implemented with any three of those languages exclusively. So this online chat, for example, can be implemented using a little bit of JavaScript code and a little bit of CSS for your site, as well as an HTML widget. It doesn't require any server-side installation, therefore it does work on Wild Apricot. Anything that can use those three languages can be implemented. And so if you're somebody who's a little bit of a wizard with any of those languages, you can really do some fancy things on Wild Apricot. In fact, there are some of you out there, I know you're probably in this session, so if you do want to show off what you've done, head to the Wild Apricot Facebook Tribe and give some people some examples here, because there are some fantastic things that I have seen. I just really want everybody to know that you can do these sorts of things, but the key things you want to look out for are the ability to embed and also that it sticks to HTML, JavaScript, or CSS exclusively. You won't be able to install server-side code on Wild Apricot. So anything that requires an installation is not going to work. Anything that works in a web or in a virtual sort of space with those codes and embedding, that will work. So try them out. There are tons and tons of things out there. A lot of them are free as well. So if you have any ideas, take a look. Okay, Coach Elaine wants you to know about theme-specific functionality. So we did mention that selecting a theme first and foremost when you're considering a new design with Wild Apricot is probably the most important thing you can do. And the reason is almost every single thing about Wild Apricot can be changed, whether it's the design of the pages, the colors, the backgrounds, almost every single thing, except the theme-specific functionality. Theme-specific functionality is not necessarily things like the colors or backgrounds. Those are largely just ways to present the theme. But theme-specific functionality includes the behavior of some elements of the actual theme. So like what happens when you click a button on one theme versus what happens when you click a button on another theme. Some of them may have animations, some of them may not. You can kind of see on these few examples that I put on the slide that there are a number of things that are different between themes, but these are largely hidden. They're more back-end. They're not immediately obvious to people. So it's not a situation where when you're creating your very first Wild Apricot site that you largely have to think about, but if you are considering a redesign, then I would definitely take a moment, head to the help site, and check out the theme-specific functionality, just to make sure that there's not one thing on one theme that would save you a bunch of time versus another theme. For example, the secondary menu gadget is only available to some themes, and that lets you put a secondary menu. But I've seen very many people use that secondary menu. So if it is as common as you seem to suggest to me, then definitely consider using one of the themes with it, so that you don't have to struggle to create a workaround option later. So I think most people do this sort of thing because it's our standard advice when you get in touch about switching themes. But I just want to make everybody aware that it does exist. It's a 30-second read. And that way it's something to reference if you do want to make sure that you get exactly what you're looking for. This is a fun tip. Coach Nikki recommends using multi-column layouts when you're creating your pages. And what happens is a lot of people may not play with the layout functionality at all. In fact, I know that most people don't play with the layout functionality, at least not beyond their initial setup. And I almost think it's a little bit of a shame because using some cheats, this ability to use multiple layouts can actually, well, I mean, it really is a cheat because it's that easy. It lets you design things in a way where you can largely just drag an actual page border between sizes or between the columns on the columns that you're looking for. I'm picturing something in my head. I'm having a hard time describing it. So let's go to the next slide because this will make it a lot easier. So when you are considering multiple themes with Wild Apricot, you'll see that next to the gadgets button, you actually have the layouts button option. And that'll let you, by default, it'll let you select 1, 2, 3, 4 column layouts. Now, the reason that this is so useful is if you take something like that 2-column layout, drag it into your page, then what you can do is you can have different items on different columns of that layout. So the one I use most often is I'll take a 2-column layout, I'll put my menu bar on one side, and then I'll put the login button on the other side. Now, obviously, nobody needs a login button that takes up half the screen. So what you can do is, no, I didn't take a screenshot of it, sorry, but what you can do is you can take that middle divider for the layout and drag it, which means that you can have the login button occupy this 10% of the screen, the menu bar occupy the other 90%, and it can all be in one contiguous line. It works really great for things like that menu bar example. If you want to put things like shopping carts for the online store up in your menu bar, but you don't want them to take up like their entire line, then put them in a multi-column layout up there. That way you can just give them their own space. It also really works for your page content itself because you can do things like, well, just the ability to drag that middle bar really allows you to create some really fancy page designs. So it doesn't have to be a 2-column layout. It can be a 3 or 4, whatever you have in mind for planning, but definitely try it out. Try putting one of those 2-column layouts in there, and then you'll see that you can take that middle bar between the columns and drag it whichever way you like. Really saves time when you're considering your design. Something else is the revision history for Wild Apricot pages. It's kind of unused, but I do want everybody to be aware that it does exist. So if you make a change to a Wild Apricot page, that is actually saved as a version of the page, which means that if you wake up tomorrow and you realize, oh, what was I thinking yesterday? This bright pink is not working for our site. I need to go back. you can actually go and find the actual previous versions of that site and then restore it either as a brand new page so that you have both pages that you can work on and consider, or you can just restore it, your previous version of that page. So these are, it stores, I think, 100 different versions of pages. So it's going to have a really large change history there. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of confidence to not only play around a little bit because you can revert, but also if you are trying to track down what happened, always check out these previous versions because you may actually find that some particular update is the reason that you may be having an issue right now. So you can track it down a little bit this way. It makes it a little bit easier to backtrack and get things back on or get things rolling. Now, Coach Gordon wants you to know about search engine optimization with Wild Apricot. All of these features are actually built right into your Wild Apricot pages, but they're not always used. That's okay if you're a smaller community and you don't really need to attract people in a public capacity. But if you are looking to attract more donors, more members, basically more people to find your site, then you'll want to pay attention to some of the options that are available for search engine optimization on Wild Apricot. Now, some of these are pieces of advice that are more global. You'll find them regardless of whether you're using Wild Apricot or WordPress or whatever it is. They're just good pieces of advice on how to get noticed by search engines. Things like repeating the actual name of your organization within the content of your website. That way it can actually be found by search engines. However, something that is a little bit a little bit missed and underutilized on Wild Apricot is the actual ability to change the page URL itself. And you can see on where the arrow's pointing on the slide that by default, all your pages just get a page number. And a lot of people, unfortunately, stick with that default page number. So most of their sites will just be, website.wildapricot.com/page 7329. That's fine because they do work perfectly well. And if people are finding them okay, then you have nothing to be concerned about. But if people are looking for them, and let's say they're searching the professional organization event calendar, well, they're certainly not going to find it if Google is only caching the page as page 7309. So unless somebody's searching for page 7309, they're not going to find it. So consequently, I often recommend, especially for those things where your sign-up forms and registration forms are, definitely use this page URL feature to name your pages. And then do things like repeat the name of that page in the page content itself, preferably in an H1 heading 1 element. Some of this is getting a little bit more complicated. There are plenty of resources out there if you want to learn how to make a blog post that can be read by news readers or search engines, but this will help your Wild Apricot page be found. And of course, that's going to help, hopefully, for you to bring in new members, new registrants, and stay in business that much longer. Now, Coach Stephen wants you to know that if you are copying something from somewhere else and you do want to import it into Wild Apricot, it's generally not the best idea to just copy and paste from one place to the other, because a lot of the formatting doesn't necessarily get brought into Wild Apricot in the best way. So consequently, if you take something, copy it, and then paste as plain text, so that you can just get the actual content with none of the formatting attached to it, then that plain text can definitely be pasted in Wild Apricot in an email or a content box, wherever you're using it, and then edited using Wild Apricot's formatting tools. So it's kind of a situation where you're going to have a lot more success if you can just take the content, strip all of the formatting, and that's done by done by clearing the formatting for it, then pasting it into Wild Apricot and then readjusting the formatting. Just from experience, you're going to have a lot better success that way than by trying to fix the formatting after it gets misinterpreted by Wild Apricot. Whatever website you copied things from may have its own formatting rules and styles, but when you bring them to Wild Apricot, they're not always the exact same. So you'll sometimes see them be really messy. But using this plain text, this clear formatting method, you will definitely save yourself a lot of time. And it means that you can basically copy entire essays from places, strip all the formatting, then put them over on Wild Apricot and adjust it as needed. So thanks, Coach Stephen. Another small change but big difference is to use a favicon on Wild Apricot. So a favicon is the little, that's the icon that will appear in somebody's browser bar to show what page they're on. And by default, the Wild Apricot one is, I think, a little globe, a little gray globe with some latitude and longitude lines on it. But you can actually change that, and that information is in our help site. Just go and search for favicon. But what it can do is it can make it so that your site can have a custom icon up there in its website preview bar. And that can make a huge, huge difference. I mean, that is, I've seen people, you know, this is one of those things that's going to make somebody smile. So if you can make the right person smile in your organization, I guess you can probably keep your job that much longer. But it's also just going to make it a lot nicer for your members. It's going to make everybody feel like they're at home. It'll be a point of distinction compared to all the other websites that people may have up there in their browser, so that they can find you a little bit easier. And there is a full guide on this. In fact, there's actually a couple of sites out there that you can use to help you make this icon. Then you'll just take that and put it into Wild Apricot. It should be nice and easy. So take a look, and of course, if you need any help, let us know. But if you haven't done that yet, I hope by the end of the day, it'll give you a nice little smile. Now, free SSL. So for anybody who does attach their own custom website address to Wild Apricot, you'll want to get an SSL certificate for it. That's a secure socket layer. It makes it so it's almost impossible to commit any sort of fraud or steal any sort of data from that page because it is secure. Now, all Wild Apricot pages are actually equipped with an SSL. If you open a brand new trial, they all have SSL by default. But if you put a custom website address on top, that's not necessarily going to have that same SSL. The good news is here, we actually have a free service that'll allow you to attach it to your site. So if this does sound like you, and you're not noticing that little lock icon on your page, or maybe your members are seeing errors such as the site's not secure, then definitely get this SSL. It's absolutely free. You can do it from within your account. You'll just want to head to settings, site, and then domain name management. It's right in there. Or you can just get in touch with us at support at Wild Apricot. We're more than happy to help there. But definitely get this done. This is going to just, this for security purposes, for visual purposes, but pretty much there are no negatives to this. So definitely consider it. And like I say, if you are using a Wild Apricot page and you have not put a custom URL in it, you have nothing to worry about. That's already attached to your page. But yeah, everybody will be a little bit different here. So take a look at yours. If you don't have it, please do it. If you need help, let us know. Now, we're kind of wrapping up the session here, so I want to show where you can get some of that other help if needed. So Coach Tyler wanted you to know that we have a fantastic Facebook tribe. There are a couple of thousand members on it, and they are really fantastic people. They are not only Wild Apricot customers, but there's some Wild Apricot staff. We have some of our partners on there, and it's really just a fantastic community of people who are generally interested in helping not only their members, but one another. I know that the tribe has been a little tumultuous at times, but I always really respected being there. So I really do recommend everybody getting involved with something like this. Find your fellow association managers, find your fellow subscription service managers. You are all doing the same sort of job for the same amount of people. And there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to rely on one another. So if you are looking for help, and you've already checked Wild Apricot, definitely check out the Facebook tribe. I think it's invite only, but you should be able to get approved very shortly. In fact, I'll have, as this session is going on, I'll have somebody frantically clicking approve on anybody who does want to join that right now. So you'll want to look for the Wild Apricot Facebook tribe. That's what it's called. Or Wild Apricot membership tribe. Let's go back. Yeah, that's the red icon. That's what you're looking for. Okay, now we talked a little bit about what you can do with things like HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Coach Steven and Coach Mark, actually, I'm going to put my own name on this too, really think that CSS is probably the most powerful thing you can equip yourself with at this stage in order to create future-proof and really fantastic looking things going forward. I will be completely candid. Well, actually, Coach Steven taught me CSS. I'm fully willing to admit that on camera. And it was in a very casual capacity, probably as we were sitting and having lunch. I'm definitely not an expert at it, but I wouldn't say that I'm an amateur either. But I will definitely say that you know, those books when they're like CSS for dummies, they're talking about me. I'm the dummy, and I need instructions like that. Now, the good news with something like CSS is there are tons of instructions out there on the internet. It may not be something that Wild Apricot support really teaches people how to do. We don't really maintain custom CSS, although the system allows for it. We can always give you advice on what to do, but we can't really validate your code. It's not within our support capabilities. It's not really something we do. However, what I found is that if I go to the internet and I just type something like, how do I do this with CSS? You'll find tons of courses, you'll find tons of free information. Basically, the user community for things like programming is extremely altruistic, and there is just a ton of free information out there for anything you're looking to do. So if you're looking to make sense of something like a developer console, you want to learn how to edit things so that you can manually adjust colors on your site, you can adjust spacing for words. I really can't begin to stress how powerful CSS can be. So if you if you find yourself with some free time, you find yourself with the desire to learn a new skill, I can only really highly recommend CSS because it will, the changes, what's the best way to put it? Because CSS is all visual changes, you get to see them right away. So it's one of these things that is immediately and infinitely rewarding, and it'll allow you to do some really fantastic things with Wild Apricot. So I don't want to get too much into it because we don't support it, but there is a ton you can learn out there. It's really not that difficult if you do follow some of these tutorials that are out there. And I really look forward to seeing what kind of things people come up with. So mention it in the tribe, definitely. Let's see what you have in mind. Okay, now, because we've been talking about some of these complicated concepts like CSS, and if that doesn't sound like something that you want to approach personally, we do have an entire partner network of professionals who have proven their ability to work with Wild Apricot, not only the Wild Apricot's design elements, but also the back-end stuff like CSS or implementing APIs so that Wild Apricot information can be shared externally with other programs. Whatever it is, we have an entire network of people who know how to do that, who have tons of experience doing that, and they can be reached pretty much at any time. Many of them have free consultations. Many of them have their own websites and own methodologies. So definitely take a look. In fact, some may be at this virtual Personifest, some may be in the Wild Apricot tribe. So get in touch with people, see what is available out there. And if you find that you do have the budget to approach a project like this, consider a partner. That way you can get it done with the expertise it deserves. But of course, there are always things like the Wild Apricot training courses, and the boot camp is one I've always been partial to. It's something that's broken up into 5 lessons that new administrators or new volunteers can actually find their area of specialization and learn it pretty quickly. And that way they can be able to manage their Wild Apricot account very easily. So if you follow it front to back, it'll actually take you through most of the setup for Wild Apricot. It has a number of the tips and tricks we've talked about today, such as the bulk editing, built right in. And of course, it is always available. It's on demand. You can check it out at any time. In fact, I do believe I will be making a new boot camp, this year in 2020. So look forward to that one. In the meanwhile, I hope that this does help your new admins to get up to speed. Now, finally, as we're reaching the top of the hour, I don't know how I do this. I've been doing so many of these presentations for not only Wild Apricot, but my entire career that I seem to be able to time them perfectly. So I was hoping to leave some room for Q&A, but instead we just get Coach Mark's tip. I know that my name was conspicuously absent. So I'm going to take a page from Mr. Steve Wozniak here, and I'm going to suggest that you should never trust a computer that you cannot throw out the window. I'm actually going to reach over now because luckily in this day and age, most of us have these cell phones, and they're relatively light and also relatively aerodynamic, can be easily thrown. So contrary to Mr. Wozniak, I actually do suggest that in this day and age, you can trust most computers on account of their size. So it's a little bit of a tip. Hopefully it gets a smile out of you, but I think we're through that mud, and no longer do we have completely apartment-sized computers. We just have the small ones. That extends not only to you, but your members too. Everybody's using these small computers these days. All right, I guess we're at the top of the hour, so I really want to thank you for being here. If you do want to copy these slides, they're going to be at info@personifiedcorp.com. If you want to get in touch with the coaches, we can be reached at coaches@wildapricot.com, maybe to help you with information about how you can get new chapters on board or what you can do for your admins. But otherwise, if you're an existing client, you have any questions, just get in touch with support@wildapricot.com. We'll be here all day. We'll be here after Personifest the entire time to answer as many questions as we can. It's really been a pleasure having you here. Now, really quickly, because I got about 40 seconds, it's my pleasure to have you here, honestly. I know that many of you are taking time out of your busy day. You're here to manage or to help manage your members, but they don't always see the hard work that you put in. Now we do at Wild Apricot, me, especially the coaches. We actually can see you guys working. We can see how hard it is that you're actually working on behalf of your members. And I just want to thank you. Everybody Personify, all of the Apricots, everybody that I can possibly speak for, either in an authorized or unauthorized way. I just want to thank you for everything you do. You're true champions. So thanks so much for being here. It's been a pleasure. Have fun at the rest of Personifest, everybody. This is Coach Mark signing off.